I think what has played on me a lot in working with individuals is the way in which race breaks blackfellas. I've seen the extreme end of it where you can lose your whole sense of self in the course of the fight. You know, anger may be the spark that lights the fire that is needed. Joy has to be part of this fight.
Diradul Smarang, Yundul Gayan, Baladul Galari Kibia. Good day, everyone. I'm Kuyan. I belong to the Kalari River, which runs through Wiradjuri country. Miyagandi, Bala, Kennedy Bull, Colbull, Carol Bull, Slocky Bull. I belong to the families of Kennedy Coes, Slockies, Carols, Wategos. There's probably 10 more we couldn't list, but we've got a time constraint today. It's Miyagi, Gary, Gilang. I belong to Kara. Dinji Mali do it's Mayini Bull, it's Nardambang Bull, Gadigal, Gilang. I pay my deepest respect and honour to the country of Gadigal and the people who belong to Gadigal, which is where we're filming the next Impact Policy podcast. I'd like to welcome all our listeners back. Our fearless leader, Sam Johnson, has stepped aside. I'm pretty sure because
he was scared.
He was windy. I just think he knew how excited I was. I was putting the pressure on a little bit, but he let me take over today. Just for context for everyone, we have Professor, that's right, hey? Professor Chelsea Watego.
I've been called worse.
Yeah. An academic who's worked between like health spaces, racism, everything in between, has written in many different contexts on different platforms. 2 years ago, was it? Released Another Day in the Colony, 3?
I think so. 2021, what's that?
4.
4 years ago.
Jesus.
Wow, where does the time go?
If you haven't read that, get a copy or just mungie it off your cousin or something. I've got Mum's copy at home and she asked for it back yesterday, actually.
I have actually signed copies of the book to people who they've borrowed it from. So I do love that the book gets stolen.
If you haven't read that, it's a must read. Yesterday, for everyone's context, was at the book launch for Black Thoughts, essays on Black love, Black power and Black joy. I've been tearing through it over the last 24 hours. It's already challenging. It's challenging some of my thinking and probably pushing me to examine myself and where I fit in as an Aboriginal man, in not just in my professional work here at Impact Policy, but probably more broadly in the context of which I live. We've been yarning about mob and our connection, and I just thought we had to slip in an intro before we get an hour into it. But thank you so much for coming on. We're really excited about it. If you want to introduce yourself, I guess.
Yeah, no, look, thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful weekend on Gadigal country, and I don't take it lightly being in someone else's country, and particularly in speaking, because I can't speak for this place. So I'm very conscientious of that. So for those who don't know me, I used to be known as Chelsea Bond, but I was born Chelsea Watego. Bond was my married name. I'm Mununjali and South Sea Islander through the Watego, Williams and Slocky families, so we've got that Watego-Slocky connection.
Nice.
Born and raised on Yuggera country, and lived there most of my life, and probably for the last 26 years or so, raised my family in Inala, which is a suburb on the outskirts of Brisbane, a very proud black community, and it's been a beautiful place to raise our 5 kids. And worked in health originally. I studied health, and funnily enough found myself doing race in all kinds of places, not just health, but in I think the work has followed where the fights are, and so I've kind of gone with where I've been called to do the work, and it's been a journey.
Well, thank you for coming on. This is the book here, Black Thoughts Matter. for everyone at home.
It's short and thick like me.
It looks like a Bible. I swear to God, I was reading it going, this is the Bible of Chelsea Watego, according to. And it's going to be the Bible for me, I think, for at least a little while, because even just in the last 24 hours, it's really challenged a lot of the things. I think there's things in here that I wish I knew how to articulate over the past 10 years, working in between the public sector and just existing. I think it's really a really important read already, as was Another Day in the Colony. How did the book come about? What was the thinking for it? Yeah.
The book is a collection of a decade of writing, the non-academic writing. So all of the op-eds and essays, that are, not all of them, but almost all of them. Some of them are essays in playbooks, some are on online articles, and in the age of digital media, one of my colleagues, Dr. David Singh, he'd said to me, "You've got work all over the place, and it would be good to have something to hold that work together, so that if people want to find your work, they can find it in one spot." Because I think some of the platforms that have got essays published there, they don't exist anymore, and so I selfishly wanted a bit of an archive of my own work.
Yeah.
But what I also wanted to do with this book was to use it as a kind of a manual for other black writers, because in looking over the last 10 years of that writing, I've learned a lot, and I wanted to be honest about the mistakes that I see in my work, and I wanted it to be, some of it's a cautionary tale. This is not Chelsea knows everything. This is me sharing, this is what I've learned. Yeah. Looking back, I wish I'd done this, and really attending, one of the violences of race as an ideology is this one that we accept, and that is the idea of our intellectual inferiority. And I hate that. I hate being in conversation with mob who have accepted that myth that we are not smart, that we couldn't know, who questioned their voice, question the stories that they want to tell, and whether it's PhD students I supervise or people who are writing the complaint letter to their employer, whether it's someone writing their first article, who are really like beating themselves up about their own words, and I resent the violence of racism that tells a people that they can't know their own experience. And so there was a bit of rage that fueled this book as well, to go, I want anyone, people who are doing writing or thinking, to be able to get something from this book, and not as, this is the guide to being a good writer. It's more, this is the advice that you should ignore, that will dispossess you of your story. Stand in your story, fight for your story, and believe in yourself. And so, I really I want people to read this and go away and write their own book and tell their own story on their own terms. That was the goal of this.
We were just talking about our mob and how we're connected in those stories of hardship, to be fair, and like really survival in its purest form, and not just like in terms of life or death, but in terms of culture and family and community. And I think like to see someone like you connected to through those stories put like work like this out, and like I know, like you say, like fueled by rage and things like that as well, but it gives, like for me as a younger black fella, like it gives me almost feel like it validates that my experiences and how I examine them and interpret them and how I want to articulate them is valid. Yeah, good. And I think I was talking to my cousin Duck last night after the book launch for like an hour and a half, and then we text all night. I was sending him...
Sorry.
It was like high school girlfriend, but it's my cousin in Melbourne, you know what I mean, from Cowra. He was laying up there, was just sending photos of the book to each other and stuff. And he's a clever fella, and he was saying that, I'll blow smoke for a second here and then we'll move on. I'll make you shame for a sec. But we talk a lot about the ideas.
Hurry, criticise me. I'm ready for that part.
He said that, he thinks you're the most important voice for us. We talk a lot about how we think and our thoughts and how we examine things and the direction we want to go in as we hit our 30s. And he said he thinks you're the most important voice in Australia. And then he goes,
Oh, thanks, Doc.
I think Australia, but definitely for us. I was like, yeah, definitely for us,
You
for
know,
sure.
that's who I'm here for.
Yeah. And I think like the fueled by rage thing is really interesting to me because there's so much love and joy and black. There's almost like this love and joy is the power source, but then there's also rage, and how they coexist is something that I've never really thought about prior to your work. Yeah. Could you like delve into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think that rage gets a bad rep. Yeah. And you know, I remember Vernon Archie, one of our amazing black artists, he I think it was he told the yarn about every day I'm full of rage. And if you know Vernon, you don't get that sense. But he explains that he's full of rage, but he doesn't embody it or perform it in the way people expect. And so we have this idea of rage as being, I don't know, unbridled emotion, it's negative, it's hostile. I am outraged by injustice. I am indignant about being thought of as less human. And I think rage is a good thing. Because rage does fuel my writing. It's in the moment of, that shouldn't have happened, that was wrong. And then I've got to write and think about it. And I've got to work through it and do something with it. So for me, rage has been productive intellectually because I have to go, what is this feeling? And I need to understand it to not have control over it, but to make sense of it. And I mean, that rage comes from love, a love for our people. I'm angry about being treated less than, because I believe we deserve much more than that. And so this, the things that I get outraged by is because of my love for my own people, and this refusal to buy into the racial logic that we are inferior morally, intellectually, all of those things. And I think that, you know, if you look to our own stories of our own people, the generations that have come before us, I think it's rage that has got us into where we have not resilience and coping with things and making things culturally safe. Yeah. You know, I think about the racism my father would experience as a truck driver. I mean, there was no reconciliation action plan for him dealing with the wharfies, being made to wait last to have his truck loaded. You know, he had to work out what he was going to do. And so I think that sometimes we forget that in the midst of injustice, we have a right to be outraged by it. We should be angry about it. The challenge is, what do we do with it? And fortunately for me, writing helps me do things with the feelings that I have to try and make sense of them. Yeah.
I understand that. I think I should say I empathise with that. I think I've always had, like a lot of blackfellas, you have a lot of anger because you get Tamana Tahu, which you spoke about yesterday, walked out of camp when I was about in year 3, I reckon.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? I was about year 4. Like I remember it. I went for Queensland, and sometimes I still do. Like I've never I've never really made my way back. Like I was 9 or something, and I walked out with him. Yeah. And these were like early introductions to things on a bigger scale than in your neighbourhood, because I was raised in a neighbourhood and community that, like, there was a lot of blackness around me. It was sort of, there was like racism, but it was a safe place. It never felt, until we come up to Sydney, that changes, of course.
That's right.
But so that anger, like, is always there, and my mother carried it, and my father, and like you inherit it in some ways, which isn't all bad either.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, like all things, anything can be potentially unhealthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think toxic positivity is just as dangerous as unbridled anger. And so it is about going, well, as blackfellas, we should be able to experience the full range of emotions. And we know that, blackfellas, both men and women, are cast as only ever angry. You know, we have a chip on our shoulder, we play the race card, we're a threat to our own children, we don't even raise our children right. So there's we have been cast in this light of the angry black.
Yeah.
And that's somehow not useful and not productive. But it's a caricature. It's a racial caricature, and I insist on I'm not going to perform that racial caricature. However, as a human being, I still have the right to be angry about some things, and or to experience rage and joy.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about finding joy in injustice. And so it's not that I suggest that we all should stay angry.
Yeah.
I know as blackfellas we have to be conscious about how we seek joy in the injustice of things.
Yeah. I think I've heard you speak before about your work being a privilege. Of course, it comes with like weight and things that you're exposed to and things that you have to carry around. And I really think that that's an interesting point, because it seems like it's an outlet for how you feel.
Yeah.
And I think about like a lot of our mob who don't have the privileges of having these outlets.
Yeah. Well, see, growing up, the only books we had in our house were the 1970s World Book Encyclopedia and the Bible.
Yeah.
And I was the nerdy kid, and my older brother and sisters used to put shit on me for being a nerd.
Yeah.
Like I was the kid who would teach the imaginary classroom, do the assignments, and I'd love doing assignments, that kind of thing, and they used to put shit on me. And so I grew up with this being deprived of texts as a child, but I really loved reading and thinking, but it was very much dismissed. And my father, when I said I was going to uni age 17, was quite disappointed in me because I wasn't getting a real job.
Wow.
At that time I was working part-time at Coles as a checkout chick while in high school, and he just expected, we grew up working class, so it was like you finish high school, you go get a job, work full-time, and you do real work. And he thought universities were like, it's not meant for people like us.
Yeah.
And they don't do real work. They just fluff around,
Yeah.
So I grew up in an environment where academic work was not held in high regard, good ways. And but to arrive at a place, and I didn't always want to be an academic. I wanted to be a community worker, and I did, and I've done that for many years now, in addition to doing even the academic work. But I love that I get to write and think as part of my job. And I do recognise that as a privilege. I don't have set work hours, and that is a challenge of the work-life balance stuff.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy thinking, and it is a privilege that I get the time and the space to do that. But some of the work, it's not just thinking for the fun of it and writing for the fun of it. It is heartbreaking work of some of the work that we have to produce. Whether it's a criminal inquest or, and going through that evidence and trying to understand how race has worked as a structure of oppression in the death of a blackfella. That hurts the heart, that kind of work. But also, for me, it's the best use of my intellectual labour, that I can be called to be a witness in defence of black people, in defence of the humanity of blackfellas. And so I feel very fortunate to have found a place to, how do I use this brain of mine in service to our people? And I'm glad that I've got to that place instead of reading from the World Book Encyclopedia to an imaginary classroom.
A long journey, that one. You think about, doing this work, which is heavy, and in this book there's a lot of heavy topics from what I've read through so far, but there's also like a lot of joy and defiance, and I think like connecting the dots, or following you connect the dots between this anger and this joy. It also seems like the black joy, it's almost it's like a form of spiritual cleansing or self-care that balances out the anger that comes with the work almost, or just existing even. And
I see it as joy as a form of exercising our sovereignty. In the last section I include some of the speeches that I've done in my career, not many, I've missed a couple of them that are kind of standout ones, and I think I've included the Black Joy is for Black people, and had to do a TEDx talk at Byron Bay.
I've seen
on
it.
Joy.
Have
you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, loved it.
Delivering it was an experience, because it wasn't was mostly white fellas, right? And it's
Yeah,
Byron Bay.
of
So I was
course.
among the white women and out of place in the green room when they were all, hanging out. And here I was, the angry black woman, speaking on joy and kind of rousing them about it. And my ex-husband, he come with me to be the black witness in that big auditorium. And it wasn't fun doing it.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was going to create was going to create joy for the people watching it.
Yeah.
And I first realised that years ago I had to do this race debate at Latrobe University.
Yeah.
And it was has racism entered the mainstream? And they had Tim and Tom, these two non-Indigenous peoples, as the experts on racism. And there was a big sort of public outcry about, well, hang on, where are the rest of the voices? And so I got called in last minute as the Indigenous voice on this racism debate. And I was last placed in the whole debate. And that's a fun one to watch because what I didn't realise what I was doing at the time. And I just told the truth and kind of took the piss out of everyone else in the premise of the whole debate. And went and sat down and I was on my phone looking at Messenger, not realising the cameraman was still filming. And the cameraman did his job that day because he just, as I was giving shade to certain people, he went to their faces in the midst of it. And I found it afterwards, blackfellas were having watch parties, drinking, watching this show, and it brought them so much joy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's what I can do. There is the joy that's on our terms.
Yeah.
That's distinctly for us and not as a way to, black joy as a way to make settlers feel better about having stolen our land. It's just our joy.
Yeah.
And so I like to think of black joy not as something that's performed for others, but something that we get to experience. And it may look different and hit different than what joy means for other people.
Yeah, I think you spoke yesterday about going to university and finding out that we're all sad, dying and lost our culture. And I was talking to Duck again about this last night. We were laughing because where we grew up, Northside Cowra, we all played footy. Dad was in the footy team. All we did was laugh.
Yeah.
There was stuff that was difficult at times, of course, but I remember we used to go into different rooms of the house to laugh because we didn't want our family to know how funny that they were. Do you know what I mean? We didn't want to give them the credit, so we would try and hide it all the time.
Oh, no.
That's how bad it was. And then you leave home and then you people talk to you through a deficit lens. And I think when you're young, it did happen for me, is your identity starts to be reshaped by what you're meant to be. I actually think it's taken me the good part of a decade to fully understand and come to peace with that's something that has happened.
Yeah.
And you get wild at yourself because you allowed it to. And I think some of the things that you're putting out about...
But that thing about the idea that you allowed it to...
Yeah.
We don't tell victims of violence that you consented to it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing for me, the understanding racial violence, and if we understand the way we understand other victims of violence, we don't allow those kinds of lines to sit. We don't let victims of violence say, well, yeah, you should have done this and you should have done that and you consented to it. We don't consent to the racial violence that's perpetrated by academic institutions and various disciplines who seek to discipline us. Yeah. We didn't consent to that, so sorry. I just want to say that you didn't choose that.
That's a really good point. I'll come to peace with it soon, I promise.
Good.
I think this idea of power is a really interesting one and something that I've probably spent a lot of time thinking about just for a long time. I think probably from a cultural lens, firstly, and somehow it hasn't always aligned with how I see power in terms of what I need to do or our mob need to do to get our own power back. And I think some of your writing and listening to you speak, it's starting to... I'm not saying I found conclusions of where I sit, but it's helping me re-examine power again when I felt like I was, growing up, late teens, early 20s especially, learning about power in blackfella way, something that we hold. And it's something that you don't put over other people, holding power is something that you keep for yourself. Yeah. And it's those without power that it's because they don't have it themselves, is they try and extract it from everything around them. So that's really where my base has always been. And then I also, the understanding culturally was when you're upset or unbridled anger is giving your power away. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I've struggled to come to where I fit when I feel angry, but it's actually fueling me doing something positive. Yep. like it doesn't really quite. I'm sure it does, but in my mind, I'm still trying to examine how they fit in, because I know I look at back some mob from Cowra, the Tent Embassy, and what happened there. There was anger and there was conflict. Back to Windradine was a 34-year war. Like, just from my home, our survivors relied on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just think the way that you're able to articulate power, joy, love, and anger as all coexisting, I think it's really important for me, and I'm sure it is for like a lot of other black fellas who are trying to figure out their own way. Yeah.
I think, and you know, some of this learning has come from working with victims of racial violence. Most of it's in employment contexts. There's lots of different people that my colleagues have supported over the years, who you know, often reach out because they're feeling broken or powerless, or they decided they're going to stand up, but are kind of at a standstill about how to navigate that and what to do about it. And just watching that process and walking alongside people with that process is, you know, anger may be the spark that lights the fire that is needed. But then it's okay, what do I do with that anger? And also I've had to learn about how to support people to have a place to be able to express it and outlets to be able to, you know, articulate that. And I think what has played on me a lot in working with individuals is the way in which race breaks blackfellas. And because oftentimes when you come to racial complaint, whatever medium that you do, you know, you might complain to your boss or go through a full legal case on that spectrum, it's the same pattern in that the racial violence you're seeking some remedy for will be reproduced even more forcefully through that process. And I see my work in supporting people as not letting race break them. I know that from my own experience of watching my ex-husband go through that, working as a police officer for 16 years, and the way in which it changed. It found its place in our house. That racial violence, and he became unrecognisable to his own children as a result of that. And so I'm very that's fueled a lot of the work that I do and how to support people, is that I don't want them to have to go through that same process. I've seen the extreme end of it, where you can lose your whole sense of self in the course of the fight. And so that's, you know, joy has to be part of this fight. And yeah, not having our people be broken in the midst of the struggle of things. And even if the verdict, the outcome isn't a win, I talk a lot with people about what winning and justice looks like for them, because different people may take different approaches to naming racism in whatever context they're experiencing it. And so I encourage people to look at what do you want to do about it? And there are actually options. You could do this, or this. What does winning look like for you? What's peace look like for you? Because people have to be able to, if they leave the workplace, they have to go on and be able to provide for their families. So how do we move on from that and live full and rich lives, even knowing what's going on? So I've seen it in the walking with people on these journeys of making sure that the sort of how we look after our people in the midst of this, so they don't lose sight of who they are. And that is the dispossessing nature of racial violence. It's to make us forget who we are, make us forget the power that we hold, irrespective of what job title we hold. And so a lot of the stuff that I do with, and that's what shaped the writing, is to share that message with other blackfellas of not allow, we want to get angry about the injustice, but not letting that find a place in our heads, in our hearts, in our homes. I resent spending my time thinking about my perpetrators. They don't get to take that from me. And so we've got to find that balance of, I'm going to get outraged about the injustice, I want to do something about it, but they're not going to take away the power that I hold.
Yeah.
and the possibilities of things that I might create moving forward.
Yeah.
Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, I love that. I think that idea of holding power and like supporting other mobs to hold power is really essential. Like I'm sure you're the same. A lot of us in different institutions have had those experiences, and they can have such a great impact on you that's actually hard to fathom. Like the amount of impact it's.
Well, what makes me wild when it comes to racism, blackfellas are given all kinds of advice that goes against what we tell victims of domestic violence.
Yeah.
You know, blackfellas are told just, suck it up, don't complain, just be better, behave better, don't worry about it, We don't tell that to victims of violence, generally.
Yeah.
But yet blackfellas, no matter what the industry, even our own people give us that advice.
Yeah. Don't
cause trouble, it's not worth it, you're going to have to pay a price for that, don't put yourself out there. And I just think that's so shameful that's compounding the violence.
Yeah.
Because we're insisting people just become resilient to it.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
I think I think what was different when I was having these experiences was me and my mum had entered sectors at the same time. She had me young,
right.
So I was finishing school and she was going back into a sector, into the DV sector.
Yeah.
So we've sort of been on this journey together, which is a really weird and sort of beautiful thing at the same time. But I think what we are learning, like we've had to learn on the run, is like how it works within systems. We knew how it works in the world, and we had a way of dealing with it that we had inherited. But dealing with systemic racism, that's not. It's not overt, and I think like for people who have, like you were saying earlier, would second guess their own intelligence because of this racism, and sort of these types of things are what have been more difficult to navigate.
And there is a generational difference.
Yeah.
Like I had to reflect on how my father dealt with racism and my stance, and the way in which race and gender works. I mean, I'm read as ethnically ambiguous.
Yeah.
My father was a black man. There was no escaping his blackness, and so a black man speaking out has a very different consequence to say someone like myself. And we grew up in different times.
Yeah.
And so some of the, I grew up with we had the turn the other cheek, be 10 times better, which is, it certainly helped. I've certainly it's forced me to work really hard, but I've had to reconcile with the limitations of some of that knowledge in my time, because that working 10 times better has meant that I've almost worked myself to death.
Yeah.
And it's not good for black bodies to have to always be 10 times better. We can't be expected to be superhuman while being dehumanized, So I've had to reconcile the intergenerational differences around what to do with race, because we grew up in different times.
Yeah.
And what worked for him in his time is different to what might work for me in my time.
Yeah.
So I think there's an interesting thing too with the generations and I don't want to, I felt bad, I think, reflecting in the book, in another day in, being in conversation with Dad's philosophy and my own, is I wasn't denigrating what he did in order to survive, to put food on the table for 4 kids.
Yeah.
But it's just that sharing the learnings and being in conversation around that.
Yeah. I think something I've come to a conclusion of a while ago was that when I look back at the way, whether it was my family or other families that we know dealt with things a few generations back, or the decisions they made, that no one of my time has the right to make a judgment. It's okay to review and to examine, but to make a judgment is incredibly misguided.
And that's why I struggle with the whole discourse about intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
It annoys me.
I'm really interested in this.
I find it offensive. And I think it has a political function, and I think it draws on a racialized logic.
Yeah.
You want me to keep going with my monologue?
Please. So badly. More than anything.
Okay. Intergenerational trauma. I think there is this sense that, and I think it was Murkionis who pointed this out one time on Blackfella Twitter years ago, this idea that our ancestors did something wrong in order to survive, and that we're suffering from their poor decisions, that just because we couldn't cope. And this idea that colonisation was this event back then.
Yeah.
And our inability to cope with it is what's caused the supposed moral decay and dysfunction of black communities.
Yeah.
And when I think about the stories that I grew up with at my kitchen table about my ancestors, about what they did to survive, we feel very proud about the stories of Nana Slocky, Auntie Dora, these stories about our ancestors, our heroes, who all of the things they went through in order for us to be here. And so intergenerational trauma, what it does, it disguises, everyone talks about resilience. It disguises the actual resilience of blackfellas intergenerationally, the ingenuity of blackfellas. And there are so many rich stories about our resistance to colonisation that sit in our family trees that intergenerational trauma just wipes from the record.
Yeah.
And so, I find it further demonises black people as morally inferior. And that it's been passed down, inherited from our ancestors. Like, how fucked is that?
And also that, I love that idea of it sort of says that it's the colonisation stopped, now it's just being passed down.
Yeah, we're doing it to ourselves now.
As if me, my mother and my nan all individually haven't had our own experiences, constantly.
Yeah.
And I think I wasn't aware of, I hadn't thought of that or got there until you had spelled it out. It's one of those things where you're like, how did I not see this before? Yeah. It should be, I'm sure there's someone out there who's science-based who's going to say, well, you're doing inherent certain things, etc. But it's beside the point. The point is that the deficit is put back on us again as a people.
Yeah, and I'm always cynical about the things that settlers get excited about.
Yeah.
Because it serves them.
Yeah.
And so I'm, cynical about reconciliation. I'm cynical about intergenerational trauma. I'm cynical about resilience. I'm cynical about close the gap, because it's very clear who is benefiting from these ideas, materially, politically. And I think it was Professor Irene Watson talks about being sceptical of things that settlers cast as being in our interest.
Yeah.
And Professor Lester Rigney also talks about having this healthy skepticism, that we have to question these, the new waves of things. You see it in higher ed, you see it in the business sector, the new Indigenous thing, the Aboriginal artwork.
Yeah,
it's on toilet murals in schools and paddy wagons. It has a political function.
Of course. We
have to recognise that. And so I think we have to have this healthy, vibrant conversations amongst ourselves about these indigenising moments in certain places and what gets up and what gets kept out. And there is, we see, this universal Indigenous aesthetic that settlers draw on, whether it's the one Indigenous appointment, whether it's the artwork, the rap, all these things, and going, well, what is the material benefit that is being derived for Indigenous peoples exclusively here?
Yeah.
And I used to do, I'm such a nerd, one of my favourite pastimes is doing word searches of raps.
Unreal.
And what's amazing? Very few say race or racism in them.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of stuff about culture, our culture, and recruiting and retaining the blacks. It has real Native police energy. But anyway, so it doesn't, reconciliation action plans typically don't deal with race and racism. They deal with how do we benevolently help the black people to be as good as white people.
Yeah. The word reconciliation is crazy to start with.
With who?
If me and you have an argument after this and then we reconcile, that's what the word's meant for.
Yeah.
It's not meant for the context or anything near the context of the experiences of black people in this country.
For those of us a little bit older, reconciliation, the movement, came out of attending to race relations. But people have forgotten it. It emerged out of because the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation did all these studies about race relations and all that kind of stuff. And once Howard changed reconciliation into being the people's movement, it became a sort of corporate sector possession to make extraction culturally appropriate. And so it's shifted, like the origins of reconciliation has changed when we had, Howard, I'm not sure if people, it's still on YouTube, where he's at the final reconciliation conference, banging the podium, lecturing black people who put their backs to him. And saying we should not be dwelling on history and black armband and all that kind of stuff. Like, he changed the concept of reconciliation quite substantially to this current moment we have today and how reconciliation is understood. And the fact that now when you look at reconciliation action plans, including the Elevate ones, they don't mention race and racism.
Yeah. So it's...
Well, how?
Who does it serve?
Yeah.
Yeah. In previous roles, I've managed teams who had average employment plans in the sector, and there was always things that I wasn't happy with and other mob weren't happy with, but it was almost like we just got to get some people set at the table. And examining some of your work and hearing you talk, I was telling you yesterday, now I go, I wish I'd got this a couple of years ago, because now I feel real shame. But I think that thing about who just pushing black faces onto the table that are usually the black faces, unfortunately, that are elevated by white people to sustain the institution. But then you also spoke yesterday about existing in the season that we're in, and I was really, and then of course us as impact policy as an extension of that. We really have this podcast studio in this office because of the institutions that we collaborate with, and I think we do it, like, we try really hard to elevate community voice in an authentic way, but it's almost like we can't fully ever be independent in this space. And then there's this idea that you spoke about with multiple truths as well. So we want to get blackfellas in leadership positions, I assume, but then there's all these pitfalls which can strengthen the violence against blackfellas who exist in these institutions and experienced by them. It's complex. I wouldn't say it's complex, but it's new to me. So I haven't found a conclusion, and selfishly I wanted to pick your brain, I guess, into how those things intersect. Look,
I think if we can only see black leadership as existing in white institutions, in colonial institutions, then that is a failed imagining of us. Is black leadership only visible once we become the first, and that's the other thing. We need to retire the title of first of their tribe. I'm so over the first Aboriginal to have done X, Y, and Z.
Oh, yeah.
Because that title's getting longer for some of the categories in which people are claiming to be the first of. It is very discovery-like, and often it involves raising a blackfella who's done something already. And why we need to claim this hierarchical being the first, I think it's a bit ick. But settlers encourage us, and they've always given us breastplates to reward us for being a good Aborigine. So I think we have to be careful about how black leadership only becomes visible to us when white people endorse it. There is black leadership in our communities in all kinds of ways, and it's not it can't be, so I'm not saying that we shouldn't have black politicians or black CEOs, but we can't restrict the idea of black leadership to those job titles exclusively, and really broaden our imagining of what leadership is. And I've talked about the Howard government, but the abolition of ADSIC in the last 25 years or whatever, there was an active dismantling of a black leadership infrastructure that was deliberate. And what we saw was not just the defunding of black community controlled sector. Today's black organisations are largely what's been referred to as the government-run, Indigenous community controlled organisations, because the sanctions placed on them make them less community controlled than what their origins were. We've had during this time also the disbanding of black educational spaces. So they took the black academics out of black support units in universities and mainstreamed everything. And we have a generation who have not been in a black-only teaching and learning environment, who have not got their first job work in a black community-controlled organisation. who don't see, growing up going to AGMs in their community for their local black organisation to have a say in. Instead, they've had to get the scholarship from the mining company.
Yeah.
So this has been decades of dismantling any kind of black leadership infrastructure, and I think it's incumbent upon us now to recognise that for what it is, and rebuild black collectives on our terms. That people can move in and out of different spaces, but we have to have something where we come to our own kitchen table to strategise, to organise and to build black leadership that's not dependent upon the employer that grants that, because we're handing over our power.
I think like this idea is applicable to everyone who's intersected with any sectors or institutions. And I think that's what I really wanted to do today, was approach ideas and for people who are listening, figure out how it applies to them and how they can strategise. I think for me, that's a journey like I'll be on for like a while.
Yeah.
So without finding conclusions, I think is really important in this conversation. Like I think the idea is the first thing to accept and understand, and then to examine how it's gotten here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that it's been really purposeful.
Yeah. It's by design.
Yeah.
We didn't just go, oops, we made the wrong choices. No, the mainstreaming agenda and dispersing the natives has been a settler colonial tactic from the very first time they landed on these shores.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. So when blackfellas get too much power, they move in full force to disperse us. I mean, the abolition of ATSIC wasn't because the whole institution was corrupt. It was that ATSIC was lobbying on the international stage. There was a political movement that took place, and what we did is we found a couple of bad blacks to go, well, they wrecked it all, and black people can't be trusted at all with their own affairs.
Yeah.
Not even an advisory committee to Parliament.
Yeah.
Not even that. I mean, this is 20 years in the making of this reality that we are stuck with. And, our black leaders are being nurtured by companies with traineeships and cadetships. Yeah. Which have been inherently violent. I mean, I've gone to these programs and had kids crying, lining up crying, sharing the violence of those experiences.
Yeah.
Like, we have a responsibility this next generation to create these black spaces where we build that black leadership and not leave it to some corporate sector, extractive industry to do it, because it's killing our kids.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think when I think about...
Sorry to the sponsors.
Yeah, who's going to sponsor us, actually? Yeah, I'd love a sponsor. We'll paint the other half of this room then. If I can read out... Would you mind if I read out Black Men in Suits article?
Oh, God, then.
Because I hadn't read it till last night, and I just felt like I couldn't believe I hadn't read it. I've sent it to 15 people.
Shut up.
I'm just going to read a few sentences, and just for people at home, these sentences are not one after another, but I just thought I could paint a picture to how the article's introduced. Unbeknownst to him, he screams to the world, "I'm more than black." It is an appeal to the oppressor, not just to be seen, but to be seen like them. For this is a man who loves the patriarchy more than his people, and it's titled "Beware the Black Man in a Tailored Suit."
This is one of my favourite pieces, and it came from a place of anger. It was the conditions that inspired my race discrimination case against the University of Queensland, where I was the only black academic with a PhD that was leading all of the research grants of a research unit, and I was deemed incapable of being the director of that research unit. And they decided to keep a white sports historian in the role instead for several years after that, who was not supervising PhD students, getting research grants for the centre, any of that kind of stuff. And so I was the black woman sweeping the floor, turning off the lights, doing all the things, but could never be, in that leadership position. There were 2 black men in suits that were on the panel that made that decision, who were the only black people on that panel amongst the white people, neither with a PhD. Neither were academics, but they used their power to erase my labour. And I had to make sense of that. Like, how could they do that? And they knew my work.
Yeah.
And they were party to that violence. And I had to deal with the betrayal of that black man. Because I write a lot for black women and defend black women, but I back black men, Yeah. You come for our men, I'm coming in too, And I've got 5 sons, you know, and I know the violence that black men encounter in this world.
Yeah.
And I had to work out this. I had to process the betrayal of those black men. And so I wrote. I was angry. That next day I just wrote this article. It was funny, when it got published, I had sisters in the DMs just going, I know this, and like trying to, like, yeah, I know who that is. And everyone thought it was this guy that they know. And it turns out it's that guy. It was a thing. And I just love that it gave voice for black women who had those experiences. You know, we have black women experience the betrayal of the white women feminists and our brothers, because the proximity to the patriarchy, we can't get that in the way in which white women and black men can. And so we are always the rung that they step on to get closer to that. And and I was able to find joy in it. You know, it's a humorous article. It's not, you know, it's embellished and defamation. It's, you know, it's exaggerated for comedic effect, but people could see it, and I was pleased that I could find, because there were so many elements of what happened, the violence of that, both in the lead up and subsequent to that, and which I've written about, and that was a way for me to be able to process the betrayal, but also be able to laugh at the absurdity of it all, and just let it out.
Yeah.
So when I write, it's a way in which I can externalize the feelings that should not find a home in my head. Yeah. That I have to go, no, I've got to get them out because I can't carry that. And so it serves a function for me selfishly, but I love that it does things for other people.
Yeah, I think if we can go...
How did you feel reading it as a black man?
No, I loved it. I feel like that conversation or that thinking was something my mother had introduced me to for a long time in a less systemic way.
Love your mum.
Yeah, love your mum. But more back in the community when we were growing up, she would be frustrated at black men not defending black women. That's a constant conversation in our household growing up, or between her and my auntie, and I'm in proximity as a kid. You know what I mean? While they're having a Chardonnay or something like that. You know what I mean? Having a charge. And then I think when I was in the public sector, when I came into the policy side of it, into that head office exec level conversation, and I was around black women predominantly who were more experienced, smarter than me. Just incredible. Still talk to them constantly. Yeah. And I was getting elevated more than them, or I had the opportunity to express myself angrily. Yeah. And it would be responded as being a stand-up fellow and staunch and stuff that. And my colleague who was in her 50s, who was brilliant and a mentor to me, had to rely on me to sometimes, without saying it, to communicate certain things. Mm-hmm. So then I was going back to people that I know and having those conversations, but I probably hadn't seen it in a way as it exists in a system until that time. Yeah. I'd seen how it exists socially, but in a system it changed. And I think that article, it probably, not that I needed validation, but it just spelled it out in a way that's humorous and you can see it. Yeah. You know the fella.
You know the guy.
You know him. I think how race intersects with gender. My mum works in the DV space, but domestic and family violence, if you come from community, unfortunately, it's, most of us have been, not maybe directly, but our families have been impacted by it. Our women haven't been safe since colonisation, came over the Blue Mountains back home. I understand the historical context, but nonetheless it's an experience that we share, and that proximity to the patriarchy for men and the opportunity it provides almost to, your article articulates, abandon your own people, and worse than that, act as to strengthen the institution that has its foot on their throat, is something that I don't think is really recognised by people in these institutions. And even though it's purposeful, I don't think it's fully understood the level of damage that it does for other blackfellas who are interacting with that institution, either voluntary or otherwise. Yeah, because the caricature of the black woman fills in for all of that, so you don't have to think about it because the caricature is enough. And I think about some of the work we've done around
disappeared Aboriginal women and the police inaction around, their disappearance, and how vivid these racialised and gendered tropes are in working to... People just don't even do the things they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so this racialised and gendered trope is so violent. The Queensland Government commissioned us to provide a report to the independent inquiry on police responses to family violence, and because we were resisting the push for criminalising coercive control.
Yeah.
And because what we know, when police attend DV cases, black women are rarely seen as victims and often misidentified as the perpetrator. Yeah. Black women are the fastest growing prison population in this country. It is so easy in this place to visit violence upon black women and have it just rendered invisible. And we're seeing it in the child protection system. We're seeing it in, police call-outs around family violence, police in action when Aboriginal women go missing. We're seeing it in the promotions of black women on boards. It's, from the street to the suite, that violence is the same, and it's the same trope at work. And that violence, the other side to that violence is there are people that are benefiting from it.
Yeah.
My thing is, oftentimes we talk about racial violence and perpetrators will often focus on intention as a distraction. Yeah. You didn't mean to. We didn't know about it. And it's like, well, now you do. Now can we get to impact?
Yeah.
Let's focus on the impact of racial violence and deal with that, rather than being caught in this little merry-go-round of intentions and unknowing. There is this... the historian Henry Reynolds wrote a book, I think it was in the 90s, Why Weren't We Told? And so I refer to this Why Weren't We Told syndrome of the settlers.
Yeah.
Because every cultural awareness thing you do, there's always the people that say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
It's 2025. We can't say we didn't know shit now.
I agree. We live in the age of information.
You can Google stuff now. You didn't know there are blackfellas here and that we might have had some form of political sovereignty. You didn't know Terra Nullius was a lie? So I think I'm no longer entertaining the Why Weren't We Told syndrome. Where the reality is there, statistically, materially, the question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah. I think that thing of moving from intention to impact is so essential, and it's why people who take action on racism are continually met with the racist violence that initially got them there, is because you can keep pulling into things like intention, which puts them back in the centre of it all over again. I think... have you heard the term unconscious bias? Yeah.
Okay, I don't believe in unconscious bias. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
It is a device that settlers use to claim innocence to the violence they commit.
Yes.
So I don't entertain unconscious, but you'll know there's all these fancy words to say anything else but racial violence, and so I'm very explicit when I'm talking about the impact of racism. I'm talking about racial violence in all of its forms, because there are all these fancy words. The health sector have all these amazing words for when they misdiagnose blackfellas through racism, but they call it all kinds of other things. We've invented this whole language that really kind of provides this barricade for settlers not to deal with the reality of racial violence. So I'm like, no, we're not using those things because it's a device.
So they're really points of reflection and self-examination for me, and I mentioned it real quick to you yesterday about white fragility as well, and all this language that I've used in an attempt to support other mob and break down systemic racism, unbeknownst to me, sort of supporting the language that keeps white fellas safe in those institutions. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think the white fragility, placing fragility and vulnerability back on the oppressor who's committing the violence, it's almost genius in a way. And it's like the optimist in me thinks, surely it's just like a natural pattern that white fellas use, and then it gets pessimistic, and I think that's too purposeful. To find the word fragility to use to describe yourself as an oppressor who uses violence is a creative thing.
It was a white woman that wrote it, so of course. But even the fact that, that one of the most widely cited anti-racism books is written by a white woman.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the racism of the racism, right?
Shamefully here, I've read it too.
I have looked at bits of it, and yet, look, when I first encountered it many years ago, I was like, oh, yes, and I did use it in teaching a little bit in terms of setting up the scene for the white students who had to centre. So, yeah, look, we've all worn outfits we're not too impressed by looking back now. It's part of the learning journey.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have cited it, I've read it, and I've just evolved since then. But yeah, when you think about it, the racism that's in anti-racism work is quite astounding to go, like, some of the most... and, blackfellas got that saying, white men tell you listen.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah.
It is a thing.
Definitely.
And I certainly, teaching whiteness, I may get the guest lecturer I may use may be a white person to speak on whiteness, because I'm not going to cop that shit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cop the resistance to it.
Yeah.
So if we understand how race is working and that we're conscious about the dynamics of it and being strategic about it, not mindlessly accepting these racialized logics as this is the natural order of things, there's no problem. I think there's no... we shouldn't feel guilty about being strategic and understanding how race works in order to get the work done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I feel like going back to the systemic aspects, that a lot of people who listen to us exist in, when we're talking about Aboriginal employment plans and RAP plans and black voices getting elevated by white institutions, just to sort of circle back to something that is a bombshell, and but I really want to talk about it with you, because my time in the public sector...
Some water.
Yeah, have some water.
What is the bombshell? We're ready.
Newly identifying blackfellas.
Maybe I shouldn't have a drink.
and how that intersects, because I have blackfellas reach out to me constantly about their frustrations in not people going on their journey, but holding space that they exist under, and how it silences them and devalues them. Lots of things. I've heard you describe it as another act of violence, and I think it was really validating for me, trying to navigate the balance between people having journeys and those things, and there's historical reasons for that for sure, but then also being frustrated that it so often leads with a professional journey and not a personal one. That
part... Yeah, I mean, we talk about black women being the fastest growing prison population. The ambiguously Indigenous is the fastest growing tribe on the continent.
Yeah.
I mean, the census figures show that the increase in the population that's quite significant. And our mob are very, very generous. Very generous. We want to find ancestry in people who aren't even black. We do want to claim people and go, oh, who's your mob and how are we connected? So we have that urge to be in relation with other blackfellas.
Yes.
And help people find their way and go on their journey. In our communities, we are very, very supportive of people, our kids coming back home. Yeah. Effectively. That generosity gets weaponized in industry, because that's my issue, is not about people returning home or finding their connections. But what I'm seeing increasingly is people are seeking a stat dec for a job or an opportunity without connecting with their own community. Yeah. Like, find your cousins before you find that scholarship. Yeah. Yeah. It's not that you're not entitled at some point, but you've got to build those relationships. The other thing is, I know that I have Irish ancestry. Yeah. I'm not fucking Irish. Yeah. And I can live with the fact that I've got these different ancestries. Yeah, yeah. But knowledge of that ancestry does not entitle me to possess that identity, because it's not mine to claim. And I do think it's possible for Indigenous peoples or peoples to say, I've discovered my ancestry, but that does not make me necessarily entitled to claim that identity or that position. And I don't know whether there's room in our consciousness to think about distinguishing between ancestry and those that have connections, because a lot of times these positions that are created, that are identified, that first selection criteria is often about your knowledge of community, of culture. Mm-hmm. And ancestry alone, and a recent discovery of that ancestry, does not meet that criteria. Yeah. And to say that is not to say, well, you don't have ancestry. It's you need to do the work to connect with your community. The other thing that gets me wild with the newly identifying Aborigines that get elevated into Indigenous leadership positions is the violence they visited upon blackfellas.
Yeah.
And the way in which they pathologise our communities as inherently violent. They're the ones that use the terms cultural safety and lateral violence all the time. Black communities, this mystery utopia of cultural safety. I don't know who grew up in that black community where that was the reality.
Yeah.
But our communities, we critique things, we debate each other, we have it out with each other.
Yeah.
And the idea that any form of black critique is lateral violence.
Yeah.
And it's these ones that have framed it in that way, that have never had to be called out at a meeting, never got roused on by other blackfellas.
Yeah.
Because they've never had relationship with other blackfellas. So anytime a blackfella might say, oh no, I disagree, then they take it as an attack on their identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talk about white fragility.
Something that is interesting to me as well, I've had these conversations with people from other cultural backgrounds. One of my good friends is doing his Masters in Indigenous Education, but he's Māori.
Yeah.
But he's been around blackfellas, one of my best friends. His kid has a Radri middle name after me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even then, our argument can become quite heated on this topic because at his university that we will not name, a lecturer was teaching him that, Aboriginality is accessible to everyone in a way that's and she was a newly identifying Aboriginal lecturing at his university. He's come home and talked to me about it, and his views have been shaped by her. And then, it's funny because in this country, if there was a Māori or a Tongan or a Samoan leadership group, and I have ancestry there, which I have some Māori ancestry, Benawatuan, we spoke about. In what world would it be normal for me to take a leadership role without ever engaging in that culture? We're the only people here who are subjected to this. And it took me a long time to even recognise that.
Yeah, This is not how it works everywhere else.
And he's a pro black fella. He's a left wing, he's a radical dude, and he believes in self-determination, but then also believes that him and his lecturer's viewpoint is relevant. Which, now he doesn't. Cause we had the,
but you went outside, now Gammon.
They too big.
But this is my thing, and why I end up writing about it. And that the chapter Another in the Colony, the chapter 5. I've got sisters now that use chapter 5 as the term. Like them chapter 5 ones over there. The reason I wrote about it, and I had to get lots of feedback from mob on it because I was very aware of the violence that would come my way about writing like chapter 5, because these people are in very senior positions in our sector. They're everywhere. In the arts, they're everywhere. And the reason I had to write about it was because increasingly we've got blackfellas doing their identity work via PhDs, and they're becoming Indigenous knowledge holders through the university system. And they're creating the corpus of knowledge about what it is to be Indigenous.
Yeah.
And are making stuff up.
Yeah.
But they're the scholars.
Yeah.
And, I used to be against confirmation of Aboriginal documents back in the day.
Yeah.
Work in higher education, my position changed very quickly.
I bet.
You need to have them. These stat decks are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's not about the one person. It's the phenomena
of
settlers claiming possession of our identity even.
Yeah.
And now they're making up what it is, what our culture is.
Yeah.
What our knowledges are. And they're teaching it.
Yeah.
That's not a one-off.
Yeah.
That's in lots of universities. And that's, I think, what worries me is, in 30 years' time,
yes,
what is the knowledge that has been created about us? It used to be the anthropologists that we'd have to contest their imaginings. Now we're fighting the new identifying scholars.
It is the new frontier of this.
It's a new frontier.
Yeah, I think about this all the time because I see it so much in spaces I exist in. it's really difficult to navigate. It's exhausting, but it makes me so wild inside. Sometimes I have to disengage for moments because I feel quite powerless. Like it feels really hard to know how to even approach these things. I have a white cousin who I've never met, but his grandmother's my great nan who was white. I loved my great nan. She lived around the corner from me. She was racist for sure, right? Like definitely. Like even though I was young, I know that. Love me, definitely racist. There was photos going up about her as a proud Wiradjuri woman attached to a black organisation of like my mum's white side of the family. Do you know what I mean? And it feels, I remember my mum saying, because it's like traumatic to me, and I don't know how to I don't know. For me, it was hard at first to I was thinking, don't let it get to you. We can't do anything, and it's powerless. Like it feels really powerless for us, and I don't know.
Because if you name it, you're violent. You're attacking someone's identity, like you're doing it's the unforgivable act. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, University of Newcastle, and a shout out to Nathan Towney, big respects. University of Newcastle is the only university that refuses stat decks.
Yeah.
You have to have a confirmation for Aboriginality, and it's like it puts through, I think, the largest cohort of blackfellas across the country through that university. But there were a couple of scholars from that university, academics from that university, who wrote a peer-reviewed academic paper demonising the university for that position, demonising the black staff that work in Woolatuka, and saying that they weren't culturally safe because they questioned asking who's your mob. They've pathologised this black space, and this is happening in real time.
I've seen that happen, like complaints and reports made about people asking who's your family.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to preface as well for people tuning in. Like I've seen people go on journeys that are personal. Actually, I know someone who's going on one right now who always knew he was black, but his father wasn't around. He's doing all the work while working in a sector that elevates blackfellas like him and refuses to take identified roles. And he's my age. I've known him forever, and I'm watching it, and it makes me very proud and happy to be a part of that. So there's that side too. I also know a black fella who grew up, he got taken from his family, older fella, and he can't get a confirmation of Aboriginal at the moment because he's still tracking back, and that's really difficult, and that's the nuances of it.
Yeah.
But they're actually the minority of this story.
That's right.
Yeah, and they're the people that mob look after.
Absolutely. So, because the thing is, you can connect with your community and embrace your indigeneity without a COA.
Yeah.
You don't need a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You only need it to access material resources attached to that identity, but you don't need it to live your life.
No.
But I do notice the difference that I encounter more of the newly identifying, not moving into a NALA.
Yeah.
But moving into higher ed.
Yes.
So it's clear. Yeah. There is a clear motivation here for a large proportion of those that are discovering their identity for the material, this imagined material gain for it, and they're not moving into the black community to connect with their mob.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't live in a NALA.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
also,
happy to take the Indigenous leadership position and then demonise you.
It's also worth saying, I know lots of blackfellas who don't have a confirmation of Aboriginality because they never needed one for work or education. Well, so they just exist without one.
You can connect with your mob without having the job. The other violence that blackfellas experience in some of these black spaces is where you have newly identifying people taking on the mannerisms, the extractive nature of it, and I've seen the other side of blackfellas feeling violated by having their knowledge. Some of their own stories have been taken by these mobs.
I've seen that.
And passed off as their own.
Yeah.
It's really,
I think part of it is the knowing. Like, our knowing is limited as blackfellas anyway. If you grew up in a black house, in a black neighbourhood, you're still limited. Like I said, I'm 29. My knowing compared to some of the other people in my family is always going to be limited because I haven't had their experiences. But even then, you go further. If you have become black in your adult life, at some point, your knowing is extremely limited to a point where there are things that you will never know and understand. And I think you spoke about when you're black your whole life, not being able to escape it.
Yeah.
I think that's not being able to step in and out of it. That experience is central.
Yeah. And the other thing that I find frustrating, I guess, is that for some of these people, they're not honest about their story.
Yeah. So
once they become into the space, when they tell their story of who they are and where they come from, they forget the part of the journey that they're on.
Yeah.
and become they suddenly become aunties and uncles.
Yeah.
And become these cultural knowledge holders.
Yeah.
Now, I know the limitations of my knowing. I don't have the cultural authority to speak on all kinds of things, even to places that I have bloodline connection to, because it's not my. I don't have that. I haven't got that right. I don't have that knowledge.
Yeah.
So I know the limitations of my knowing and where I fit. But these ones come in and claim all the things, and don't tell the truth about their own story.
Yeah.
And when I yarn with these fellas along the way, is you have to be honest about your story, in all of its inauthenticity, because all of us have to.
Yeah.
I grew up across the road from the train tracks and the foundry and the outer suburbs in Brisbane. I didn't grow up on country and with all this gifted with all this cultural knowledge.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest about my story and what I know and do is it's shaped by my experience, and there's limits to that.
Yeah.
And sometimes these fellas, they don't know how to acknowledge the limitations of their knowing. They see Ancestry as this authority to claim knowing of all things.
Which is a white trait. Because black fellas who know heaps will be really hesitant to share it, and then white fellas who are now black are so confident in talking because they get other white fellas praise them and pat them on the back,
Yep.
and they get this affirmation from white people where we get black critique and accountability. So it's like
drag.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about lateral violence. But that's the rich. That's how we know in our communities. I always, the other thing I really encourage people to welcome is the gift of black critique.
Yeah.
If a black person's wasted their time to share their learning, because when someone gives you critique, they're showing you a blind spot in your knowing.
Yeah.
I don't always give critique to people who ask my feedback on things, because I'm sharing knowledge that I have and I'm gifting it to someone.
Yeah.
And sometimes you give them that gift, they're not always thankful for it and they get upset with you.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit more, I withhold a bit now when I'm asked for feedback on things, because I'm giving time and stuff like that. But there are some people who, when they receive black critique, they get indignant.
Yeah.
Or they think that it's, even you get growled by someone, go, oh, thanks, aunt. It's take the gift, take the learning.
That's right. It is a learning, 95% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it could have been delivered a bit nicer.
yeah, sometimes for sure.
But it is a gift, because when people give you insight into a limitation of your knowing, there's an opportunity for you to grow.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't agree with it, you come up with the argument against it, so it sharpens your tools.
That's right. That's the flip of it. You don't have to agree with it or land at the same point. I love it when that happens, when someone challenges my thinking, and then I don't even land where that person is, but
it's forced you to go, I've got to go down this little pathway now and think about this.
Yeah, I land somewhere, I've gone further.
I share my work a lot before it goes out in the public domain, and I say, I don't want you to tell me what's good with it, I want you to tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And if you're only around people who tell you you're amazing, then you haven't got good friends.
Yeah, which I see. I see that a bit with...
They don't love you if they're loving everything you do.
They also don't ask you for your opinion on things. They know who to go to. Yeah. I see that a lot, and I find it really hard to navigate. And sometimes I can't be bothered to challenge it, because I just move on with my life. Yeah. But maybe I should be more purposeful. But I find real joy, bring up cousin Duck again. Yeah. We disagree on things all the time, but I find that relationship is as important to me as any because of that. Yeah. It's really, we don't talk to each other to affirm our own thoughts. Yeah. And I think when you were talking yesterday about building a community within the colonial institution of the university, where you can share ideas and thoughts and use your intellectual labour to put where has value to you. Yeah. I think that's a really good lesson, and something I've been reflecting on as well. Because
all the critique of higher education and the academy, I love going to work. Yeah. It's predominantly black fellas who all know who they are and where they come from. I love the laughter. We've got open plan space as well. I love the laughter in our office. I love that something can happen on the weekend and we all can, whinge about it without worrying about what the colleague's going to think about our viewpoint. When something happens to one of our team, one of our family, we care. It's just and it's so nice having some of the staff who've joined our team who've worked in mainstream, and it's just like, what is this place? This feels different. It's like, no, because we get to be ourselves.
That's me right now.
Yeah.
I came in like February or March.
Yeah.
Because I had like a black team there and stuff, and we had our times and moments, but a lot of the time we'll divide and conquer. You know, like when we got together, like we should do this all the time, but you just...
Yeah.
Here, I brought a guitar in on Friday and we had a sing-song at the end of the day.
I love that.
Sometimes I have to go into other rooms because just so I can concentrate for a bit because I'm just laughing too much,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I find... I think that idea is something I wasn't probably as conscious of previously in mainstream work.
Because we spend so much of our lives at work. To me, it's like I find joy in the work. There's find heartache in the work, but I feel so grateful that I look forward to going to work because of the people I work with, and we share those values, and we've got each other's backs. But we had to create that space. It didn't just happen.
Yeah.
This has been created over years, and building up a values framework and helping people to go, what do these values mean? How they come to life when we come to work each day? I love that whoever comes through the front door at Karumba, they are greeted by someone, they're taken through with a cup of tea or coffee, and it doesn't matter who that person is that greets them, we know that you look after black people when they come through the door. My first day turning up there as the director, I couldn't get in because it had a swipe card, and I didn't have a swipe card, and you can't see from the front door anyone to get their attention. So I'm standing outside of this new research unit I'm leading, and I couldn't get in the door. And it took me back to Anala police station where the grill's down.
Yeah.
They didn't even lift the grill up. When the office is open, blackfellas got to wait behind the gate. And I'm like, nah, we're not doing this. We're going to create the space that we believe we deserve.
Yeah.
And not what white people will permit us to have.
I can just imagine like that space, you know, when you're talking about standing in your own story, that space is like a necessary component to being able to do that.
What sustains you in the work, you know, when you have the shit come down, you've got, no, this is what we're doing this for.
And I think like we can be so easily influenced when we're in mainstream spaces without like not consenting to it.
Yeah.
But like for me, I think that's happened. I think I'd be so staunch and radical, and then I reflect. I was isolated.
Yeah.
I was staunch and radical for the space I was in at that time.
You have to hold that, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think of Ronnie Gorrie's book Black and Blue, and she worked as a police officer when my ex-husband did. They came through the academy together, and she wrote about the story, and you know, and she tried to be one of the good police officers, get all the arrests. He didn't do the arrests, she got lots. But her stance was she just would put the Aboriginal flag on a desk at the station. You know, so we do have these moments where we're on our own and we've got to just hold that ground, whatever that ground is.
Yeah.
But if we do have that blessing of building community and building those spaces, they can be created even in the most violent places.
Yeah.
And our group, what's formed now, that started back in the day of having a reading group. We'd just read articles. The random mix of us who are all outcast from our discipline would come together and read an article at the end of the week. And that led to the development of the Nala Manifesto, an ARC grant, the formulation of this, that then was the foundation of Karumba Institute. So that's come over years of building community, like-minded people, and going, okay, and then through that community, building something that people haven't imagined.
I think there's a good lesson in there for me and others. It's like you don't have to have the finished product at the start. Let's just hold space and see what.
Yeah, just go on the journey, see where we go.
Yeah,
fuck around and find out.
Yeah, that's it, eh? That's it. I think this idea of story is so essential to us as blackfellas, and my understanding of story continues to grow from the time I was a kid, and my auntie Tisha's teaching me about storylines, and I don't really understand them, and then you get into more cultural spaces and you see storylines, to now like I know some up in North Sydney that run all the way home, they run down the coast, and not saying, again, not at all positioning myself as an expert, but then extending this idea of story, how it relates to country and everything around us, and then because I think that like I love telling stories, we all do. Yeah. Me and my cousins, that's all. Like my cousin, I met my cousin's new partner for the first time. Yeah. You know, and we all come down to Melbourne. Poor thing. She just she just had to hear 42 stories of places, people's rugby league that she's never watched in her life because she's from Victoria.
So she just smiled and nodded through the whole lot.
She said some of it was funny, but then I was getting lost in them, you know. And I was like, I feel real bad, you know. Like, I'm sorry, sis. It's not all. We just had to get it out of ourselves. Yeah. We got a few days. We needed a few hours just to get as many stories as we could get in there. Yeah. Talking over the top of each other, and then even the music. We grew up with country music, where I'm from.
Yeah.
again, dark portfolio, again, mentioned all the time. We were housemates. He was a rapper. I played country music. And white fellas that he played music with when he was in a band, they couldn't connect.
Right.
Like, you just grew up together, same neighbourhood. I was like, if you are where we're from, it's the most normal thing to us. I never examined how weird that was.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it's so normal. But they're just mediums of storytelling.
Absolutely.
And they're the two types of music that tell stories in the most plain way. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think but then I think we've sort of been going further as well, like in terms of our story and how our identity is so much just our story and our connection, you know, like what do we do when mob passes away? We get together, we just tell stories for a week straight, you know, and what we mourn, I think for me, you know, I've been coming to this place, you know, is we mourn that part of our story that we shared, because that part of that story sort of goes with them, and it doesn't have to mean someone's passing, you know, that's part of our story is what we shared, and by telling the stories, how we keep it alive, just like a songline, you know, and I think that's why telling these stories and having other mob be able to read them, like myself, I think it's sort of it's evidence of the power of it for us. And I think for, you know, the reason our stories are so often not validated by mainstream Australia is because of the power that they bring for us. And I think there's always been a thread of our story, and that's why, like, the old people's language our language was taken away, our storylines were tried to take away. I think that's why, because I think the state, the colony, has always understood that the story of power, and I think for us, it's almost like we inherently knew. But for me, like reading about a story and what you're saying like being, like living in your story, standing in your story. It's sort of they're not concepts that we spoke about growing up. They're just things that we felt. I think having them articulated is really special.
Well, even just yesterday at that event with Auntie Jenny Munro's keynote, how she pulled out the eulogies. And I was talking with Sister Lorna there last night about it, and eulogies as storytelling, and you think about that process, and everyone comes together and develops the story. And I remember she was saying, and you find out people's real names too. And I think there was a line, one of the things Auntie Jenny said when she was reading, I think it was in reference to a eulogy, and she said, in the stories you tell, remember me well. And black stories, our stories, we're not cast as caricatures. We're not cast as sick, or, you know, we're not this one-dimensional subject to be saved. We are rich, and even in all of some of the crazy scenarios of stories that we might find ourselves in, they're hilarious. You know, there's not the same moral judgment in the state's account of us in the stories that we tell about ourselves, and there's a freedom in black storytelling. And a nourishment that we get from listening to them yarns, and that's why we tell them over and over again. I mean, we're an oral tradition, but we tell them stories over and over again. And they ground us and remind us, well, who we really are, because when we get outside of our home, or even in our home, we're bombarded with stories about us that are simply not true. You know, it's funny, my cousin moved down to Victoria, and the furthest he'd been away from home, and I went to see him, got from the Melbourne airport and went to a used guitar shop and bought one on the way to his house. I said, hold on to that, because in about a month you're going to be calling me homesick. Get on the laptop, look up the Charlie Pride songs, chords, and just Uncle Charlie,
you know, and just start. It'll help you, cuz, because I know you, and you'll be homesick in about 4 weeks when this excitement's over. And I was talking to him on the weekend. You know, he's like, "Oh, thank God you picked that up for me. It only cost only a cheap old thing." But I just think, like, I resonate really strongly with that idea of story, and I actually think it's exciting to see even the last 12 months, 2 years. How, like, an understanding of a concept that you feel confident in can grow and change. Like, Yinjamata is a term like we have in Wiradjuri country. You know, it's the verb of being respectful, but it's an idea. It gets translated to respect, but it's a whole idea to be soft, gentle. Like, it shows that we're all in connection. Like, it's a whole thing. My auntie Tisha again taught me about that when I was before I can even remember when it started.
Yeah.
That's her son's name,
Yeah.
my cousin's name. And like my understanding of these ideas, story and Yinjamata and our storylines, they continue to develop and grow. And I think that's what we understand more than mainstream Australia, is that our stories are living, breathing things.
Yeah.
And they only survive through the telling. And they're allowed to change. And you said it yesterday, and it resonated with me a lot. Multiple things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's something that we just know.
Yeah.
But I think I was really grateful that you articulated that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't think we've always done that, or like for me anyway, in my family.
And because we see, like in academic space, there's this thing about they talk about lived experience and the importance of lived experience, and not just the theory, academic theory and stuff. Which, as a blackfella scholar, it's kind of like, well, it's not a binary for me, because it's, when I'm theorising about race, it's from the experience of race. I'm not divorced from that. But one of the things I struggle with the lived experience discourse is the idea that there is one lived experience, and there are times where lived experience can be weaponised.
Yeah. So
that someone says, well, I've got this lived experience of this, so you can't possibly speak about this because you haven't lived this, and it's like, it can be flattening.
Yeah.
And so. But in our communities, we know that there are multiple truths that can exist, and this one can have this story, and this one can have that story, and they're both true to them.
Yeah.
And you don't have to correct people.
Yeah.
And because we were not a colonising people, we were not a people of conquest, we don't take over. And so I think there's some dangers in some of this lived experience discourse about this is the lived experience account, not multiple ways of understanding things. That and that's why when we explain our relationship to a story, we do it, and also to acknowledge limitations. Like I'm going to speak about this, but I know it because I know it through this way.
Yeah. And
someone else is going to know that thing, but they're going to see it from that way.
Yeah.
And I always do this gammon little thing where you get the full object and you get people to argue which viewpoint is right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we all have a vantage point in which we see a particular thing.
Yeah.
And what makes it richer is actually embracing all those different vantage points.
This book is like such a great example from what I've gone through so far, but even things that you've spoken about. And I read in the back, I was trying to get as much as I could before today, and like...
Just read the forwards. Yeah, okay.
I got the highlighter out and things like that, and like, this resonates with me and things. And like, even like reading how you struggle to speak and you'd rather write, and like these things are and then standing in your story, like understanding truths, creating community for yourself so that you can stand in your story. All these things are really relevant for people like us who we've been thinking about these things, and we purposely developing our own thinking. Yeah. But just like one book like this, it accelerates that, and it gives us opportunity to share in those thoughts without being like connected that closely from a distance, and almost like catches us all up into the same brainwave.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm really grateful for it. Oh. And I'm really proud. I'm going to acclaim you all the time.
Yeah, you won it.
I claim you all.
Who I got to be?
Yeah. Didn't get a free shirt. That's all right. No. But I'm really grateful for your time. It's been
and because I should say,
man.
Sorry, with that community thing.
Yeah.
Because I always talk about you've got to recognise people, and I know I did yesterday. But Proper Now, that arts collective. For me, I learn a lot about that as a model. No, I'm not an artist, but the story of Proper Now in terms of why they formed, and the collective of urban Indigenous artists who were kept out of what was considered Indigenous art because it was in Central Desert.
Yeah.
And they formed their own collective, and the international standing of Richard Bell and Vernon Arkey, they built their own. Mm. They formed that collective. It had that black critical consciousness that informed them. And at the time when I ended up leaving UQ, a tenured position at a Sandstone University, we were in conversation with Proper Now, and there was an exhibition, and I brought my collective of nerds. And it weren't all black fellas. It was, a lot of people who were also knew what was inherently wrong about this system and its working, but were connected by values. And we formed this intellectual community of our little reading club, Yeah, so cool. But we were in conversation with Proper Now and looking at that model and going, okay, we can't keep fighting the system and seeking inclusion in this violent institution. And our success, if we ever get welcomed into the institution and put on a pedestal, it means we've sold out, because they wouldn't, if they like us, it means we're doing something wrong. And to see Proper Now's how it formed, and it was values based, and they built on their own, and they made the way for urban Indigenous art to thrive. And what we see today is a result of their work and other urban Indigenous artists who had to kind of, they were seen as not legitimate artists, because urban blackfellas don't have culture apparently. And they made a difference on the whole landscape of what it is, what black art is and what black art should do. And so I was inspired by those that have gone before us. The Aboriginal medical services, Aboriginal legal services, there wasn't existing funding for that service. There was no program. They made these services. They built them out and developed the models. And I just think it's sad to see that we've got a generation who don't see the excellence in black innovation that is divorced from white benevolence.
Yes.
Like, we think that we can only exist based on what we can get permission for. But what if we just went, fuck it, I'm going to create something anyway, and we're going to find out a way to do it. Because had we not done that, we wouldn't have the Aboriginal medical services, Aboriginal legal services, Aboriginal kindergartens for our kids to be, have that foundation into early learning. We wouldn't have our football clubs. We wouldn't have these communities that we love, that provide that infrastructure, that grounding that we all benefited from.
I think having that space, it gives people not permission but opportunity to stand in black love and black power and black story, and even black anger. In a way that, like, in a place where they can, and they're supported, and there's people
not judged or dismissed and going,
and a place they can be challenged as well in a way that's safe. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that's so important, and I think your work, and not just these books but broadly, it gives people permission to pursue the same almost.
Awesome.
I'm really grateful. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and for all the kind words. It's funny. I'm not. I was talking about the gift of black critique. So I'm not as comfortable with the compliments.
Neither.
Thank you for the compliments. I don't always know how to receive them. I'm better at receiving critique.
I feel that. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.